we should be good to go. All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Power Within You podcast. I'm delighted to introduce Chris Addams. Now, Chris is an award-winning digital transformation veteran. He's led numerous organizational transformations to move changing, cumbersome legacy systems and often toxic cultures into highly scaled, tested, fault tolerance, panacea speed, fun, increased revenue. I'm laughing because I was asking Chris earlier how to say this word particularly, but he's an amazing guy. I love him to bits. His background includes Prime Video for Amazon, BBC World Service and Worldwide, Radio Times, Variety.com, Tesco, TalkTalk, Dazn, Musabi, amongst others. And he's also a former racing driver and has passions for home automation, DIY and guitar. And I've known Chris for a very, very long time now. So Chris, it's wonderful to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Nice to be here. We probably shouldn't say how long, should we? It's
I know.
starting to rack up now,
you
isn't
haven't
it?
aged, mate. You haven't aged. You always look so
you
good.
You don't look any older either, to be honest. I think we're both doing quite well.
I think we are. No, it's so nice to see. I mean, basically, if I give a bit of background, I worked with Chris at a place called Love Film, which is, with debatable name at the time.
In Germany particularly, right?
In Germany particularly, which got bought by Amazon. And so we sat next to each other when we worked at the Amazon Development Center, which is just basically newly open. I can't remember what year was it, Chris? Was it 2010?
2011, 12, something like that.
2011, 12, yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. And my memories of seeing Boris Johnson ousted this week reminds me of when we met him when he came to the office all those years ago.
When he was ousted of a beanbag chair.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we've had a good laugh actually. But I guess one thing that we never really talked about and was never really raised at that time at work was mental health and mental well-being and emotional well-being. The conversations were great that we had with our colleagues, but really, did we say how we were feeling, how things were going?
Oh, no.
Never, right?
No, it wasn't really. I mean, especially in Amazon as well. I mean, Amazon. I don't think I've seen it in the news so much recently, but at the time, or at least shortly after, it was widely publicised about how bad Amazon was for mental health, the pressure it put on people. And I know that I certainly did. I think 4 years worth of work in the 2 years I was at Amazon. I distinctly remember doing a 9-month stint where I didn't have any weekends. Actually, I remember being in the office and watching the Monaco Grand Prix in the Love Film canteen, watching it on the big screen. That's not a cool thing, is it? Really?
No, exactly. But it was a high pressure environment. It was. And I think people used to get nervous by presenting at big meetings, and there was a lot of high pressure going on at the time, and I never really checked in with myself, to be honest, about how I was feeling or anyone else basically. But I think, going through coaching other people and just having conversations with you, right? I was on Chris's, that tech show podcast, not so long ago. And I asked him if I could nick an image that his partner created, which was amazing. And then we started talking about mental health, and this is how the conversation came about with Chris and I, right? So Chris, when did your mental health journey begin, do you think?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, following on from you being on our show, we'd worked together for 2 years, and we've known each other for a long time, and there was stuff that came out in that conversation that just never came out, like our personal lives never came out in the workplace, and I don't think that was necessarily just because. It wasn't necessarily because it was a thing that we were both hiding. I know that there's more into that, and actually people can go and listen to that episode probably to find out. But it was so high pressured that we didn't even have time to get to know people well. You knew them in a work context, and that was it, really. Yeah,
absolutely. And I hid myself. I think I was. You always think that you're different. You should be different outside of work than inside of work, and the only time you sort of became that one person was really during drinks maybe, or social events and that sort of stuff. But even then it was a bit awkward. I look back at it now, I'm like, I wasn't really being my authentic self. And that's why I really enjoyed the conversation with you, because at that point I was able to be my authentic self, because all the work I'd done on myself as well, feeling not ashamed of me,
Yeah, and I think it's it's so important to be a bit more open, which is what I'm going to try and do today a little bit, because I think that just helps to foster better relationships. And, I've actually started recently talking about, my mental health more publicly, and I am finding it's helping, and I'm finding a lot of people are reacting to it. But yeah, in terms of the journey, I guess that you could probably think about where that starts in a couple of different places. I think in terms of having any sort of diagnosed mental health, I guess that's probably maybe just before the pandemic. I think it's difficult to try and pinpoint when it is, because I think everything's just sort of gone into an awful mush.
It has. It really has. Since the pandemic.
Yeah. But I really struggled in probably 2019, I guess 2018, 2019. A lot of things went wrong for me with businesses that failed, trying to figure out how to get myself out of sticky situations that I'd got myself into financially, with failing businesses, and then some legal issues as well. And it's sort of through, and also I'd bought a house and mistakenly assumed that the renovation on that house was going to be simple. And it's probably about 4.5 years later now, and I have nearly finished the house.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That sounds like quite a journey.
It's a little premature on the congratulations, but we're getting there. I mean, this is part of the problem. It's 4.5 years in, like I say, and still working on it, but it's been mostly DIY. And I think there was a lot of stuff that I'd overcommitted to. There was a lot of stuff where I just hit a wall, really. And I decided that I needed to actually speak to somebody about it. And so I've been listening to I listened to a lot of American podcasts, and they were starting to talk about things like BetterHelp. And I thought I'll have a go at this BetterHelp and see what it's like to actually maybe have a therapist. I listened to Mark Maron an awful lot, and he's constantly talking about therapy. And so it seemed, with all of his guests, so it seemed like a good idea to try that out. And I just didn't have any luck with it at all. But
what was going wrong, do you think? What was
it was actually that particular application, because I think I'm not going to put anybody off it, because if they want to reach out, then I think it's a great thing. But from the UK, all of the therapists were based in the US, and the only interactions I could get with them were over text. And I thought, I don't have the stamina to just type my thoughts. I need to speak, which is why I end up on podcasts and hosting my own. But I think because of that, it just wasn't working out for me. I actually thought I need to speak to somebody, and because I was starting to suffer with anxiety, and I was feeling depressed, and I think it's a little bit of a difficult thing to sort of acknowledge that you're feeling that, but I think at least trying something like BetterHelp, it made me think that I actually did need to get some actual help. And so I reached out to my GP through, we use, what's it called? GP at hand. So you get like a video call with your GP, which is, it was great at the time because there was no one else was using it. So you could get a GP appointment within an hour or so.
That's amazing, isn't it? Private, or was it like NHS?
No, it's NHS GP at hand.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. I didn't realise that. That's fantastic resourcing.
Yes. Yeah, I think the waiting list has gone up an awful lot. Like normally it takes a couple of days to get an appointment, but at the time it was really rapid. And I was actually put on SSIDs, I think that's right, isn't it? Serotonin uptake inhibitors. So I gave them a go, and I also was put on a therapy course, like a talking therapy course, a CBT.
Like a CBT, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I found that was reasonably helpful. I thought the interesting and funny thing about that was they always started each session by going, "Have you had any suicidal thoughts recently?" I was like, "Well, not until you mentioned it." I mean,
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've been doing this MSc mental health, and actually GPs try to avoid asking that question because they're worried about putting that thought into your head. So it's interesting that the CBT session started that way, actually.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, literally everyone started that way. Very odd. But, in the midst of going through that, I think it helped because I was getting panic attacks. I had certain triggers that were sort of financial and legal related. And, I'd get letters through the door and I'd get this wave of panic come over me, like a huge pressure and burning in the back of my neck. And it was just awful because I didn't know what I was going to do. And, you know me. I mean, our background is project management and figuring out plans and working out how we're going to solve them. And I was just in this spiral where I just couldn't figure out. I couldn't find a way out how I was going to solve it. I did find that the medication was helping, actually, because what was quite strange about it was that it didn't take the problems away, but it made you not care about them.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. Is that sort of feeling numb though, or?
Well, I suppose there's a certain element of numb about it, but it was like, yeah, that's a bit of an issue, that. Which actually is a much better position to be in. So, in the experience of trying to solve complex technical issues, to be in a situation where you go, yeah, that's a tricky predicament. I wonder how we're going to figure that out. Actually puts you in a much better state.
Yeah.
It's much harder when it's your own thing, like if it's your own business or your own mental health, or your own financial turmoil. It can be difficult to try and figure a way out. And I think actually it stabilized me enough that I was actually able to get on with things. And I think when we did our interview, which is probably 2 years ago now, I guess, I think I was on them. I think I'd been on them for a couple of months maybe. So I actually started the podcast on antidepressants, which, again, was another thing in the midst of all of this stuff that I was taking on lots and lots of tasks. I was dealing with financial and legal pressures. I was starting to go through this depression. I was dealing with a house that wasn't finished and not barely livable. And I think I had a cat that was dying as well in the midst of all that. And
sorry.
It was, well, these things happen. But it was, there's a lot of things. I was starting a lot of stuff. And around that time, TikTok was starting to, do the rounds. People are starting to use TikTok. And my wife had noticed on TikTok, she said, I think this is you. And she was showing me these videos of ADHD people. And
stop it. So she came across that and said, by the way,
this is you,
Wow.
And I was like, really? Do you think so? And we ended up doing tests on the internet, are you a psychopath, or do you have ADHD? Are you autistic? Doing those sort of tests. And it was starting to have some sort of indications that, maybe I actually do have an issue with distractibility, lack of focus, starting lots of things. And, I think a lot of this came out under this pressure of I had just taken on too much stuff, particularly around the house. Like, I had friends who'd come around and help, and they were like, I don't really understand how you work the way you do when you're doing this, because, I would set them on a task and then I'd just be disappearing off and doing something else. And that is how I work generally. But yeah, people were starting to notice, I think.
But you did see, when it came to your professional life as well, but as a project manager, you have to see something through end to end and make sure it gets done. And you were getting things done, right? So did you feel that impacts on your work life as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think this might be another ADHD-related symptom, but I'm generally driven by people telling me that I can't do something. And so I, very, very early on in university, I was vice president of my student union, and it was an elected position. And I remember having a conversation with one of the senior members of staff there. And, I said, I don't really know what I want to do. I think I want to be a project manager maybe, because at least things have a beginning, middle, and an end, and I can move on, because I like things to turn over and I like new things. And she was like, I don't think you'll be a very good project manager, because you don't deal with detail and you're not very good at planning through, long things. And she was 100% right. But I was stubborn enough to go, I am going to prove you wrong, and created a career out of it.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, a bloody good career, that.
But the thing
That's
is,
amazing.
I've always been shit. Am I allowed to swear on this pod?
Of course.
Yeah. So I've always been shit at organising myself. I'm quite good at organising other people. I'm quite good at telling other people what they need to do to solve their problems. Whether that's, obviously that's more of a technical thing. This is the sort of direction we need to go in, but actually doing them myself can be a little tricky, because there is a hurdle. There's always a hurdle to get over of like, I know that thing is hard, and so I'm going to do all of these other things that are going to help. They're going to be contributing, but I'm going to leave that hard thing because it's going to be hard. And then I will have to do it in a massive rush just before the deadline is due, which is very ADHD, really.
So the pressure comes on, you need to get done. I mean, I was speaking to Tessa, who's also on the podcast, who got recently diagnosed with ADD. And she said that she left a pile of bills unopened for a year, basically, because she didn't want to, she could pay for it, but she just didn't want to see the things, and she just pushed them aside and that sort of stuff. And I was like, wow, that's like, and she's so successful as well, like, like you, incredibly talented, charismatic, and it's almost like a superpower sometimes, right?
That's the other side of it, really, is it really can be a superpower, because the hyper focus that you get allows you to literally do anything. Like, I don't think there's many things that I can't do. Not necessarily to the best of my, to like, the world beating standard, but I can pretty much do anything if I turn my mind to it. Like, even take stuff around the house with DIY. Like, I couldn't plaster when I started. No, I'm pretty good at it. I've had to learn how to do it. I've had to watch YouTube tutorials on how to do it. I've had to watch tradespeople that I've had around, and I can absorb all of that stuff. And if I put enough effort and focus in, then I can do it. And I can do anything I turn my mind to, really. But that's that hyper focus thing. The other thing is that there's a load of other stuff behind that just falls away, like the stack of bills, because you're in a hyper focus mode. So, it has its ups and downs, really. Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, do you think the ADHD was connected then to your depression, anxiety? Like when you look back at it now?
Well, that's supposedly a thing that happens. I mean, this is not talking as a medical professional, but like, as I understand it, undiagnosed ADHD can lead to depression or anxiety. And, there are a number of things that contributed to me getting to that depression and anxiety, as I mentioned. But yeah, I think there's a whole load of things, if I trace it back through my history of things that point towards me having ADHD. Like, even back in our time together at Amazon, as I said, I spent 4 years in the office, pretty much in the 2 year period, four work years in the office in a 2 year cycle. And, that was at the, my home life suffered as a point of that, because I was hyper focusing on Amazon and my career. So there's many things that are sort of linked to it. And I have had sort of bouts that I thought were depressive bouts, I suppose. But, I don't think I would have ever really attributed them to being actual depression, or because I think there's a certain stigmatism to that as well. Like, I think actually admitting that you have a mental health condition, like depression or anxiety or ADHD, can be quite tricky. Because it certainly was for me, actually getting diagnosed with that. Because after doing the CBT, and I think it was one of the last couple of sessions, I was able to say to the person I was talking to, I think that that I might have ADHD or something similar. And then again, through my GP, was able to get a referral to Psychiatry UK. And about 6 months later, because it's the NHS, I had an hour's conversation and got a pretty flat diagnosis that, yes, I had ADHD.
Wow. That's amazing, isn't it? Like, and I mean, like, research shows that 80% of mental health issues and things like that sort of occur before the age of 18. Did did you feel anything growing up? Like, did you, like, if you look at ADHD, which is, I guess, neurodiversity, we'd say it's neurodiverse. Was there any signs in school or with your parents or things like that that you kind of saw?
Yeah, I think it's difficult on reflection, because you then start analysing everything through a different lens. But the funny thing is that my mum is a teaching assistant. She's just about to retire, but she's a teaching assistant, and she generally works with special needs. And one of the things that she works with is ADHD. And she had no idea and was completely dumbfounded that I might have ADHD, which I think is hilarious.
Oh my gosh! I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? But if it's your own kids, you might not necessarily recognise, especially if you're high functioning as well. Like, you've done so much, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I think, you know, if you take, I think there's plenty of signs, right? I mean, again, there's this thing of like being told that you can't do something and then having to prove somebody wrong, and that hyper focus being the thing that helps you to get there. I remember being told by my physics teacher that I was going to completely and utterly fail physics at GCSE level. She said I would be lucky if I came out with a C at best. And I went, right, I'm going to solve that problem. And I was the only person to get 100% on the exams. And I came out with an A. So I didn't get an A star because I already, you know, buggered my coursework. But
this is how you are so motivated, right? Like, if someone else got told the same information, they'd be like, I'm useless, I'm going to fail, right? Like that is reinforced in their heads, and they wouldn't do so well. But you've turned it around, which I think is an amazing skill to have. I mean, is that something that's always driven you to like be able to like, I'm going to prove you wrong and I'm going to do this well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, I don't have the best relationship with my dad, and, you know, he was very much a put you down kind of person. And my response to that is to prove him wrong. I think there's a lot of people out there that are still trying to prove their parents wrong.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure you probably will go into that in many, many episodes, but there's definitely a family related thing in there. And I know that, you know, I have a few brothers, but one in particular has his own mental health issues, and he's kind of gone a completely other way and has really struggled in his life with jobs and things like that, because I don't think he responded in quite the same way to being told that he couldn't do something, or that someone might be better than him.
Yeah, you know? Because everyone's different. You know, he's obviously more sensitive as well, you know, and, you know, we deal with things in different ways. And what's amazing is that, you know, you had the diagnosis later on in life, but you still were able to push through, manage your depression, know that you needed help as well, right? Lots of people suffer in silence with this, and that's the thing. I want everyone to know that there's lots of help out there for you. And Chris mentioned a couple of names as well, that you're able to do that, but it's about seeking that help, because we are so under-resourced, underfunded in the UK with mental health. You have to wait 6 months to see someone, you know, about your ADHD as well, which is
well,
I mean,
in terms of the funding, here's the other thing that completely blew my mind and actually put me into a paralysis state for a little while, which is another ADHD related issue, right? You know, you're given a choice and you can't make a decision about it. After getting the diagnosis, they said you have two options. You can have ADHD coaching and you can have medication, and one of these is available on the NHS. You choose which one you would like the NHS to fund. And so I'm sat there going, well, I kind of want both. Why can I not get both on the NHS? It doesn't make any sense to me. So I opted for the medication because, you know, at 34, I thought I've probably got enough knowledge here, I suppose. Enough, not knowledge, but like, I learned enough ways of coping, you know. I developed strategies, like, and because I was now aware that I had ADHD, and I had the great resource which is TikTok, which really is great for like looking at some ADHD content. I was able to then go, well, I'll revert to the things that I know help me. Like, I will start to make better lists. I will keep index cards around so that I can have things, I write things down I know I need to do, and I will tick them off as I do them. And I will start to take in some of those project management techniques that I have used for years, developed myself and trained other people in. Maybe I should use them myself, and take some of those skills on. But so I kind of, although I would still think I would massively benefit from having an ADHD coach, I thought the medication was going to be the better route. But it took me I think it was maybe 2.5 months to come up with a decision that I would actually take the medication. Just because it was one of those things of going I am so busy right now, I have so much stuff to do, I know I have a decision to make that's really important to my health. But like the stack of bills analogy, I'm just going to put that off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And surely treatment should be holistic anyway. So I find it quite disheartening that only one treatment is available on the NHS, either medication or coaching, where medication and coaching can be quite beneficial in itself, because, you're able to learn those tools once you have the medication. And the medication doesn't really, and it's also your body will react differently to medication, right? One person who takes that medication might not react the same as someone else.
Yeah.
As well. But coaching, I think, is well, I'm biased, of course, I'm a coach myself. I know how powerful coaching can be, especially specialized coaching of that as well. But like you said, you've got the tools, you've through your career, through your life, you've learned to cope with stuff as well. And I know that you'd probably seek coaching if you had to and wanted to anyway, regardless. So it's interesting that they give you a choice. You made that choice. And have you started on the medication now?
Yeah, I have. So, I mean, the diagnosis for me was, I think, about 11 months ago, maybe 10, 11 months ago now. So I started the medication, I think, 7 or 8 months. I think 7 or 8, something like that. And it's been mixed, because there's a sort of titration period where they try you out on a few different things. I'm actually still in that because I've made some changes recently. But the medication I ended up on was Methylphenidate, which is basically like a microdose of speed in my language. Yeah. Which is a very strange thing. It's nothing like street speed. I've only done that once, but it's not. You don't have to rub it into your gums or anything like that. It's the first one I started on was like a slow release medication,
right?
And they start you on 1 tablet, and then I ramped up to 3, and eventually I had to take it down. But because it's speed, you have to monitor your blood pressure. So I've got a blood pressure machine, which is actually sat on my desk, so I can monitor things like that. You're supposed to monitor your weight as well. I think if you're a child, your height and your growth is important as well to monitor, because it can have a serious effect on you.
Wow.
Because... And I don't think I got the guidance I needed to. I mean, I actually got through a friend of mine who has been taking methylphenidate for a long time for their ADHD, take a break on it. I was never told to take a break from the GP or from Psychiatry UK. And I think that's really important, because when I take a break from it, I just sleep. And you really do just need, you really just need to recover. And the strange thing about it being a sort of slow release, that you take all 3 of these tablets in the morning, for example, and you kind of go through peaks and troughs throughout the day in a way that you would normally, but sometimes you feel really, you've got that energy to keep going, and sometimes you're feeling like it's dragging a little bit, but then you're going to bounce back. And I'm probably not describing this in the best way, but it is such a strange experience to take it. Like when I took it for the first time, I kind of felt silence for the first time, of actually being able to focus on stuff without all of the other distractions and noises that go on around you.
Wow.
But I think that wears off a little bit, and it kind of becomes a little bit normal. But
your body gets used to it, right?
Yeah, but it does have some strange effects. So, for example, taking the full dose and of the slow release, I was finding that it would get to, I'd take it 8 a.m. in the morning, and it get to midnight, and I could still be going. And that wasn't helpful, because then it might be, if I was still, maybe I was coding, or maybe I was writing something, or doing some DIY or something like that, then actually slowing down from that was very, very difficult. And you'd get a very small amount of sleep. And then the following day, you're taking that again, and you're back to, it's almost like having a lot of coffee really late on in the day. And I actually had to reduce my coffee intake. So I'm now just on decaf, because I was finding that as I was ramping up the medication, I had to ramp down the coffee because the shakes would start much earlier.
Oh my word. My goodness,
so
yeah.
I think that was the other thing as well. I had clearly been self-medicating with the vast amount of espressos I'd been drinking. So I think
you realising that was yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what it's supposed to do, as I understand it, is it's supposed to sort of satisfy that dopamine so you don't go looking for it.
Right.
Which allows you to then focus on things.
Okay, so when you have ADHD, is it that dopamine seeking behaviour that you're
it's dopamine
right?
hunt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which
is what makes,
so
ironically, makes TikTok really bad. And social media, because that scrolling of like, ooh, a new thing, scroll, ooh, a new thing. It's a very magpie-like disease, mental health disorder. So you can go searching for that dopamine, and it kind of puts a bit of a block on it, so that you find the dopamine in the other areas. But yeah, no, I have had to change it recently though, because I had another incident, another trigger. I was unfortunately bullied in work, and
I'm so sorry, Chris.
This is the sympathy program.
No, but like that's just not right, is it? It's just not right.
No, it happens, right? I mean, I had experienced bullying before, but that was way before we even met. Actually, ironically, for a disability charity, would you believe that? Get bullied in a disability charity, but this. People will be looking that up now and seeing which one it was. But
that's the one.
This is an activity podcast. But yes, I had it recently for a client I was working with, being bullied, experiencing gaslighting, and it really affected me to the point where I had to take a break, and I had to take at least a week off. Obviously, if you're contracting, you can't take much more than that off because it starts to become expensive. And it's taken me a good month or two to get back to being normal. But what I found was that after having taken that week off, which was totally useless for me, I didn't manage to do anything at all. I couldn't actually bring myself, I was on the floor really in terms of trying to get stuff done. And I think that is another thing in an ADHD cycle, you can go through these incredible spikes of productivity and then incredible just lulls of not being able to do anything. And it's a very strange not being able to do anything, because it's not that you're lazy or that you don't want to do anything. You absolutely want to do lots of things, but you just can't. It's very odd. And after thinking I was able to go back to work, I had an incident about a week later, and it was 3 a.m. I actually I'd been on the medication, like I said, taking it all of the time, taking it every day. And I'd gone to bed at around 2. I'd been reading nonsense on the internet, I think, for an hour. And then all of a sudden started getting heart palpitations. And they didn't go away.
That's really scary, isn't it?
It was terrifying. I thought I was having a heart attack, and genuinely. And I have like one of those little fingertip oxy monitors to measure these sort of things, and my heart rate was all over the place. It was just no steady beat, and going from 50 beats a minute to 100. And I woke my wife and said that I think I might be having a heart attack. I don't know what the hell's going on here. And she called an ambulance, and I live 10 minutes run from the hospital. Because again, I do run run past it. But they said it was going to be 4 hours for an ambulance. 4 hours.
Oh my gosh, really?
So we ended up in an Uber. And where we live has a lot of one-way streets and 20-mile-an-hour limits. And I was saying, like, it was 3 a.m. in the morning. I said to the Uber driver, I know that we're in a 20 zone, but I think I might be having a heart attack. So if you wouldn't mind speeding up just a tad, that would be great. And he wouldn't. He would go,
oh my gosh.
No.
But Well,
Yeah.
it's that thing. It's so scary. Like you've been through so much trauma as well during that time. That is just like the last straw, isn't it? Like you think, what is going on in my body?
Yeah.
How did that, when we got to hospital, what did they say?
Well, they ask you a lot of questions, which is really awkward.
Have you taken speed?
They did keep asking, have you taken any cocaine, or any other drugs? And they try to whisper it. It's very British. Have you taken any cocaine? Like, what? Speak up! I can't hear you. Like, and they're like over the, and you're getting exasperated because your heart's not giving you a steady beat. And eventually they shout back, "Have you taken any cocaine?" "No, I haven't taken cocaine. I think I'm having a heart attack." And so, I ended up being put on an EKG to measure the beats, and they were quite quick actually. I mean, it was probably about an hour, I guess, when I finally got to see an actual doctor. But they'd already done these measurements early on. And the doctor said, so you're not having a heart attack, your oxygen rate's fine, you don't, your blood pressure's reasonable, obviously it's elevated because you've got anxiety and all that sort of stuff, but what you're actually having is a panic attack. And I was like, what? How am I having a panic attack? I know what a panic attack feels like. And this was totally different because I've had panic attacks before, as I mentioned early on. Feeling that wave coming over you of despair, and I knew how I was feeling that, and and the physical response to that as well. But this was totally different because I was like, my brain was fine, but my body was having a panic attack, and I had no control over it.
No, that's when in my 20s, I used to get panic attacks, and that was the same experience I had. It was and they wouldn't stop. They just would not stop. I didn't know what to do. Didn't even know it was a panic attack at that time. So I just lie face down on a bed, hoping that it would go away, or thinking that I was going to die, or something was going to happen. I had no idea. What it was. And you're right. Like every time that happened, I felt like I was going to die, and it could happen anywhere, on the tube, at work, whatever it was. And that was the scariest part of it. Because you don't know what was your trigger, right? So what's gonna, something's gonna happen, and I don't know what's gonna, horrible.
Because you genuinely feel like you're gonna die. Like I was making peace
genuinely, yeah.
Like I had my lips had gone blue. I had numbness in my fingers, numbness in my arms.
Anything. Your whole body goes like sometimes you can't feel anything.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, has that stopped for you? Or are you still getting it?
It has, yeah. I managed to get it under control, but just by reading about it, understanding it a bit more, talking about it to other people, and knowing as soon as it started to hit that I start regulating my breath. Yeah. Like knowing that it's coming, and then I'll be able to emotionally regulate myself. It took a lot of practice though. Yeah. But I completely empathise with what you went through. Did it go eventually? Were you able to calm yourself?
Well, I was trying to do that anyway, but I weirdly think the fact that the guy told me that I was having a panic attack helped me to realise I was having a panic attack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I went home still in the mindset I was going to work that day, and convinced myself with the help of my wife that was a bad idea. Didn't take my medication and slept the whole day.
Did you?
And
you must have been exhausted from the whole experience.
Yeah. It was weird to just be to be able to lie down, not be able to focus on anything, and just sleep and wake up and it's 8 o'clock in the evening.
Oh my gosh.
And then have some food, watch half an hour of television or something, and then sleep until the next day, as if it was normal. Like, it was such a huge amount of sleep. It was crazy.
Do you know what? I mean, you talk about your triggers, and, you talked about, being bullied, about financial issues as well, like that's what's been happening. Do you feel like it's getting easier to manage your triggers now?
Well,
and you know what they are?
Yes and no. I mean, it's difficult to say because that was very recent. This is within the last... This might have been since we decided we were going to do this recording. Actually, it's that recent. But I think what I've tried to do differently is I now have some fast release medication which I'm taking. So I'm taking it in the morning and I'm taking it in the afternoon, so that it's not like this constant thing that's keeping me going all of the time. I know that I can take a break from it if I need to. I've had a lot of pressure, a lot of things to do recently, and I know that I need to have some downtime from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressures. I kind of know some of the triggers. I kind of know a little bit about when to take the medication as well. But it's funny because you're kind of trying to identify these sort of things. So even just the hour before we were due to speak today, I've had one of these sort of crazy moments of there was a thing I was supposed to be doing, which had a deadline of just before we started recording. And yet in that hour, I have booked concert tickets. I have helped my wife figure out how to play a computer game. I have lost my wallet, found my card, bought those tickets, been out to the car looking for my wallet, before obviously finding it, and like a myriad of other things. Oh, and then 10 minutes before, wrote the document I needed to do. And that's just it's so you have these moments where you just, you're kind of in a spiral and you've got all of these things that you need to do, and then you've just got to get it done. So I don't know. I think I'm still figuring it all out.
Still figuring it out.
Yeah.
So as well as the ADHD medicine, are you still having therapy to manage stuff and also the antidepressants, or is that kind of...
No, I actually stopped the antidepressants. I stopped the antidepressants, I think, before I got the ADHD diagnosis, actually. I only took them for about 6 months.
Okay.
And I think that's a thing that seems like a reasonable thing to do from what I've heard, is that, you can go on them, come off them, etc., to manage particular periods. But that's, how I chose to take it. But yeah, I felt ready to come off it.
Yeah, which I think is good. I don't think long term is necessarily the best thing either, to be fair. But you left a really courageous and poignant LinkedIn message the other day, and you said that you said that you were an ADHD sufferer, and that you were sometimes there's outside out of mind, but you're still around, so checking on me. And I thought that was really beautiful and really courageous. So thank you for sharing that. That was amazing, and that made my heart feel warm, but also to remember you as well, if that makes sense.
That's nice. I mean, I think one of the points I was trying to get across with that is that, I'm connected to like 2,000 people on LinkedIn, and I know most of those people, or have worked with those people personally, and shared jokes and shared laughs and all of that sort of stuff. And that out of sight, out of mind thing, the object permanence, is a very real thing. That if I put something in a drawer, it's gone. I've completely forgotten it existed. And so ADHD people do tend to have quite messy desks, as I understand, because it's basically a reminder of things that you've got to do. And it can literally be that way with people. That, I know that I've got emails from people, and I've intentionally left them unopened and starred them, so I know to go back and deal with them, much like the stack of bills. And the same is with WhatsApp messages, or Slack messages, or LinkedIn messages, or whatever messaging platform you can come up with, because there's thousands of the things. Unless you've got those triggers, you don't go back to those people. And occasionally you go through a list of people and you go, I'd completely forgotten about that person. Or they send you a message, or they do a post on social media and you go, I forgot about them. And there has to be a certain trigger to sort of remember them. But it is like people can be out of sight and completely out of mind. And it's how you end up having these conversations. Certainly with me doing my podcast, like, some of it has been great to just catch up with people I haven't seen for years. I mean, it must have been years, I think, before we spoke.
It was, And it's so sweet that you remembered me, though, for it as well. It was just, since then, I think about you often, and and your post just reminded me of that as well. And I hope you got some lovely responses.
Yeah, I did, actually. It was nice. And it was nice to be able to actually reconnect with a number of people. And, like I said, I've been posting a little bit about ADHD recently. I talk about it on my podcast as well. And it's interesting my podcast does touch on certain elements of it's not a mental health podcast, but it's a tech podcast. And occasionally we talk about mental health in that. And, nice to be able to share some of these experiences. The amount of private messages I got when I posted about having ADHD, with people going, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, I've been suffering from this, or for X amount of time, or I don't normally talk about this, but, you know, it was lovely, actually, to have so many responses like that.
Yeah.
And to know that there's so many other people that experience the world in that way.
They do, and we just don't talk about it enough. And that's, I guess, the reason why I wanted to do this, because I want to be able to share people's journeys, and to have this conversation is put it out there to the world is really brave, right? Like it's a vulnerability as well that we're sharing. But I think it's so needed because people will be able to relate to Chris as well. People who've, you know, gone through this themselves are realizing now they might think, oh, actually, maybe I should look into ADHD because I feel similar to that, you know, and the resources that you've shared as well, which I think is really, really helpful. So thank you.
Well, I think there's quite a lot of people in leadership that have ADHD, and I think that's often overlooked. In the same way as, like, you know, actually there's you often hear about people who have dyslexia, which is another thing that I seem to have, but yeah, there's a lot. There's
and another thing.
And another thing. Yeah, no, I think there's it's not as talked about as, you know, when you hear like Richard Branson has dyslexia, etc., etc., and you know, it's just learning differences, I guess. But that's the thing with ADHD; it really can be a superpower. That hyper focus thing is so valuable that allows you to just turn your mind to things and do stuff. It's just the understanding how you are processing information in the world, and it's such a huge thing to be able to think differently from people. That to be able to think differently from everybody else is actually a really big advantage.
Yeah.
You know, because I've kind of always bucked the trend a little bit. I always do things differently, sometimes just to be stubborn. But I think it's it can be really advantageous to do stuff differently because it gives you, that can be your edge. It can be your superpower.
Yes. And that's the thing that everyone needs to remember. It can be a superpower. You know, it's telling that, but recognizing it first and knowing what you can do with it as well, which I think is great.
Yeah. Because the other thing, I get the feeling we want to wrap up, but
that's okay. No, take your time.
No, the one thing I wanted to say about it though is it is one of those things that does feel quite stigmatized, because I felt quite upset actually on getting the diagnosis, although I would come to the point where I was probably ready to admit that I had it. I was a little upset by it because, you know, as someone who was a child in the late 80s and early 90s, it was quite stigmatized, you know, and I think it still is, even having a parent who deals with kids who have ADHD on the regular basis. The ADHD kids are the naughty kids who have to be put in special class because they can't sit still. You know.
And they're all boys generally, or from the American sort of boys that have ADHD, right? That needs to be drugged up to manage it, basically.
Put them on Ritalin so they sit in the corner and do nothing. I mean,
oh, it's so awful.
But that's what it's seen as, and I think it actually worries me a little bit of how kids are treated with it, because it really can, because like I said, it can be so powerful. You just need to know that you think differently, and some things are going to be hard and some things are going to be easy, and we just need to help you think about that in a different way. And it's such a shame that it's a stigmatized thing when it really can be so powerful, and so many undiagnosed or late diagnosed people end up in leadership because they think differently, and it is actually a skill. It
is, and that, we do wonder, like, you know, how what makes them think like that, or, you know, what makes them different. And actually, it could be the neurodiversity that they have, right, as well, because we just don't know. Neurodiversity is so new that we're talking about it. It's obviously existed for forever, but we're just now thinking about it and talking about it and thinking about how it affects our lives as well. So I think you know, understanding it, being self-aware of it, getting the help that you need, and also being able to try to see it as a superpower, I think is bloody amazing and very inspirational.
Thanks.
That's my pleasure. So I have one last question for you, and that is, how do you find the power within you to manage your mental health now, and how will you manage it for the future?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. It's still a journey for me. And I think every day it probably does get a little bit better. I think the important thing for me has always been to set goals and to know what I'm trying to achieve. And I probably ran out of some goals in my 20s, like I completed them and then didn't do a very good job of resetting them. And I think I'm starting to figure out what it is that I actually want to do and what I want to achieve, which I think is a cycle a lot of people go through in their early to mid 30s, of trying to figure out who, why, what, how, when. And yeah, I think for me it's figuring out what do I actually want to be doing and what do I need to do to be able to feel better, feel happier, manage my mental health, all of those sort of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's about setting goals and setting the right goals and taking baby steps, but having something to focus on.
Those baby steps are so important, not to put yourself under too much pressure, that you become overwhelmed again, basically, as well, right? So I think that's a really great point to make.
Yeah. Well, it's lofty goals as well. You know, those goals are big. They're big goals, and it's figuring out how to make those steps and make that incremental progress, because I think I have had a lot of big goals for a little while now that I haven't made enough progress on, and I need to be aware of why I'm making the decisions I'm making so that I can focus on actually achieving those goals and not accidentally letting them fall by the wayside. I can help you with that, by the way. Just call me. Oh, cool. Very good.
I'll keep you accountable.
Good.
Have you done this today, young man?
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I need some deadline setting, clearly, so I force myself to just do them frantically at the last minute.
So, Chris, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, talk more about this subject or anything else, how can they get in touch with you?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So that's a pretty good place to get in touch. But, I'm also on Twitter as well. It's difficult to get a good handle these days, but I think I'm Mr._Chris_Addams. There we go. That's a nice mouthful. I'll probably come up with a better one. But also there's my podcast, which is 62 episodes in now. So 60 episodes on from when you joined the show, because you were episode 2.
It's amazing.
It's 18 months in now. And that's That Tech Show. So you can find that at thattech.show, which is still going. It's available on YouTube. It's available everywhere good podcasts are downloaded. Probably on the same app that you're listening to this lovely podcast.
And it's marvellous, should I say? Not because I'm on it, but it is marvellous. And there's some really interesting people on there as well. So, but Chris, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's been so wonderful to speak to you. So inspirational. You are so successful, and I know you'll continue to be so and push through every day. And I think it's quite amazing, just regardless of all the things that you've been through, all the challenges you've been through, that you are still going forwards and still progressing with those goals. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for giving me a chance to share. Nice to talk to you.
You too, Chris. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Stop.